it is time that we do away with this draconian piece of legislation, and at least a moratorium must be brought to the implementation of the PTA, and therefore this act must be thrown out from the law books of this country. I was listening to the Honorable J.L. Pires, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, when he prefaced his presentation of this bill. He said that this is only an initial step. However, he alluded that these were very substantial amendments and certainly not cosmetic amendments. And he also proudly declared that these amendments breaks new ground. These are, given his ability with the Queen's language, he was able to pull wool over the eyes of the entire House by saying various words in trying to describe the effect of this government, which basically is a woefully inadequate cosmetic exercise, which is a minimalist approach to change the status quo as far as the Prevention of Terrorism Act is concerned. And that is why we have decided to vote against this, particularly because this doesn't serve any purpose, for the simple reason that the impact of these amendments are merely superficial and is a charade. As almost all of these amendments, the Honourable Minister of Justice is here, he will know that all of these amendments virtually have materialized, except for the reduction of the 6 months period. The rest of the amendments have materialized already through other means, connected with legislative provisions in other acts of parliament, constitutional safeguards, or judicial interpretation. So, what are we trying to tell the country and the international community through this effort? This is a virtually puerile attempt to take the focus away from the timely need to do away with the draconian piece of legislation, totally away from implementation in this country. Therefore, we are calling at least for a moratorium on the Prevention of Terrorism Act as a prelude, as Mr. Minister has already said that he is prepared to further consider amendments. Rather than considering further amendments, there was a robust presentation made by the Leader of the Opposition in defense of our position to oppose this bill, and he was followed by the former Prime Minister, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. He too very clearly articulated from his practical experience the various historical happenings that has impeded the criminal justice system in this country through such faulty legislation which deprives liberty of its citizens. Now, Mr. Presiding Member, the biggest culprits, as far as I am concerned, are the police department and the Attorney General's department. I say this because they are the people who come and tell the ministers and the cabinet that you cannot do away with this Prevention of Terrorism Act. We must retain all these draconian provisions. Now these people, they have found it a very convenient tool to conclude investigations, wrap up investigations as they please, and then get promotions. They are I dare say this, without any rigorous and substantial supporting evidence, you are able to succeed in inducing and coercing a suspect and obtain a confession under duress most of the time due to the mental trauma and the physical abuse of the torture that these suspects are subjected to. Now, confessions being admissible and important time-tested safeguards in evidence ordinance being made inapplicable has resulted in serious travesty of justice. In many cases, this has been pointed out by superior courts in this country. The officers, with the exception of very few, have resorted to this PTA as a means to get promotions, to show that they are efficient in exposing terrorism. What has happened is, and what is more, what is Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe said is also very true. Our intelligence agencies, so much of intrigue within the officers. One is against the other, and therefore he wants to fix the other. Now, what has happened to Shani Abeysekara, one of our reputed, very efficient investigators? What has happened to Ravi Seneviratne, former DIG, another reputed officer, a very good officer with a lot of integrity? Now, they are all under the scanner of this particular legislation. These are all officers who have served the country with distinction, but they are now being there is a witch hunt against them using the same legislation. Now, this is an utter shame Honorable Presiding Member. Now, I would like to say there are umpteen number of judges who have criticized the variety of manners in which this legislation is being abused. Recent among them, I would like to say Justice Bandula Karunaratne and Justice Janak de Silva. Then also High Court Judge Ranaraja in Azad Sali's case have all pointed out the puerile and very inefficient and deliberate manner in which the provisions are being abused. Now, this has been pointed out by the young judges who have been bold enough to look at the weaknesses in this legislation and pointed out the inefficiencies very clearly. Now, what happens in Azad Sali's case? Of course, that was under the ICCPR Act. But of course, remember, even the PTA contains provision, section 2H, which has a similar provision in the PTA. That is a usual practice of the AG's department to use section 2H. So it's in Azad Sali's case, it's a damn shame. 3 of our members of parliament went and made a statement. They cherry-picked certain portions of a press conference statement and then tried to bring an indictment against him. And I dare say this, in the AG's department officers who aided and abetted in creating this indictment. And the weakness of it was clearly exposed in the High Court judgment. Now, this is a very damn shame. Our institutions have become the tools in the hands of their political masters. This must end, Mr. Presiding Member. These issues must be exposed. This is a damn shame. Now, see what has happened. In every case we find. Now, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe has also pointed out how the Easter Sunday investigations had attempted to take the direction of the investigation in a different way because certain intelligence officers were coming there to save the suspects. And finally, they were found to be implicated in the Easter Sunday attacks. These were the very people whom intelligence officers wanted released. Now, they are found to be the culprits with the Easter Sunday attack. Now, the Cardinal has gone to Geneva, and there matters have been taken up. The Commissioner of Human Rights has, in her statement, has asked the government to look into the possibility of security forces being involved in this entire conspiracy. It has gone to that extent. And now we resort to this piece of legislation with so many years of use. How much has been achieved, which has finally contributed to radicalizing people. People who are held in custody for so many years for no fault of theirs. The type of mental trauma that you subject them to. These institutions are plagued with corruption and their impunity and it incentivizes torture. That is what is happening. And I would like to say this, Mr. Presiding Member, finally, the PTA has shown distrust and also insecurity and has caused human suffering to untold number of people.
Thank you.
And therefore, it is time that we totally do away with this draconian piece of legislation and at least a moratorium must be brought to the implementation of the PTA, and therefore this act must be thrown out from the law books of this country.
Thank you for your contribution.